Hello everybody, here we are tonight talking about why NHL teams seem to recycle head coaches so much. But before we get started with it, please make sure to subscribe if you're new to me or hockey, whatever the case may be. Being said, let's get on into it. So I went and looked back through the channel and couldn't really find any examples of me doing a video over this, so I thought now's the perfect time because you have a lot of newer fans kind of getting invested into the league as the playoffs approach, so they might not be as up to date with some things. And so essentially what you're going to see here probably in the dying phases of this season and shortly after is some head coaches that get fired, and not that long after they get hired by another team, and you're thinking, well, why did that happen, especially after they got fired so recently? And this is what we mean by the term recycle. Basically, they go out and they get a different job with another team as the bench boss. So there's a variety of reasons why I think this happens, and we're going to be going into 5 of these today. The first one, basically just because I think you know what you're getting. You have an idea about what the coach provides going into this, whether that be a coach that is more offensive minded, where you know, hey, we can go out there and score more goals, which might have been a problem with this before. You might have a coach that has worked with some very talented players beforehand, and you say, well, he kind of got them at the start of their career and then helped them turn into a good player. We really could use that at this stage for a certain player here or a certain group of guys, as we could be exiting a rebuild and trying to work our way up in the system. Other things too, you just have a better idea of how they like to construct their roster, maybe a little bit, and you could say, we kind of already have what you're looking for, and we feel like this is a good start for both of us to go out there and jump into whatever we're trying to do. And I should probably add on top of that, that you kind of know the personality a little bit more, and you know how they handle the pressures of being a coach in the NHL and maybe some of their coping mechanisms. You think of some of these coaches in the league, some of them like to golf, some of them like to work out, whatever the case is, you can kind of say, this is somebody that handles stress pretty well, and this is how they deal with these things. Maybe we can have kind of a symbiotic thing here where we can say, hey, we've got a great golf course next to the stadium, whatever. Anyway, that just kind of goes in with it. But I think another thing you could point to as well as why these coaches get recycled is you can point to past success. This is something that will kind of revolve back into this later in the video, which I talk about. But anytime you have a coach that's coached in the NHL and been in charge of a team that's seen success, it's really easy to point back to that success and say they were able to do that beforehand, so they could do that with us. And ultimately, I'm telling you right now, if a coach wins a championship and it's not fluky in a lot of ways, they're going to get a lifetime of opportunities. I'm not trying to throw Dan Bilesma under the bus, but they won the 2009 Stanley Cup, him and the Pittsburgh Penguins. It's been nearly 20 years. He's had stints with the Buffalo Sabres and now the Seattle Kraken, mind you, two sides that aren't uber competitive. But if he ends up seeing the Seattle side rebuild, retool, enter a phase where they are lower in the standings and they part ways, do you think he'll get another opportunity? Chances are probably. Why? Because they have that aura, or I guess Bilesma has that aura of being a cup winner, and he's got that ring. You could say, yeah, we kind of want one of those as well too. And it's not just related to the cup. I can think of a lot of coaches beforehand that hadn't won a Stanley Cup in their entire history, but they got a lot of opportunities. I mean, up until very, very recently, Paul Maurice was one of those guys where he had been on teams where they'd won the Stanley Cup, made it to the Stanley Cup, were conference champions, but they weren't able to get over the hump. And it doesn't really matter. I think it's more about, is there consistent success that you've seen in all these times that they've been coaching that is going to be a good indicator for you and something you can fall back on and say, well, they coached 14 seasons and they made the playoffs 9 times. That is better than what we've been doing in a long time. So that is why I'd imagine that previous success, especially if you've been able to point to a banner and say that I was a part of it, is massive in terms of just bringing in a guy that's already coached before that may have recently been fired or maybe was taking some time off. The third reason I think is job security for the GM. This is kind of big here. You don't really want to get too risky when you are a GM and you're worried about your job security. It's just one of those deals where you can say, again, you've already got an idea about what they want as a coach, what they can do as a coach, maybe some of the things we've already talked about, like they've achieved as a coach. You can fall back on that and say, well, I did my part. I did my homework. I hired a guy that probably should have been able to come in here right away, that is not a rookie coach, that is very experienced, and he should have been able to give us a better year, or he could. And it probably gives these GMs a little bit more time because you can say, we got somebody big. Think of, big name head coaches like Craig Berube that recently got brought over to Toronto. things are going well for them right now. But even if they weren't, you could say, well, we hired a recent Stanley Cup winning head coach, and we are a team that's been really good in recent years, going to go hand in hand. It's not always as simple as that, but there is that realism, I guess, if you look at it, because at the end of the day, this is something where we as fans enjoy it, but the reality is this is a job for all these guys in the NHL, and for a GM, it's not easy to keep your job. It's pretty easy to lose it, and it is pretty hard to be known as a really good GM. But when you are thinking job's on the line, are you going to go with the rookie? Are you going to go with the guy where you can say we've got a big sample size to work with here to know what he might be able to do for us or work us out of a jam? Now, the fourth thing I think is unfortunate for younger head coaches, but it kind of comes with the territory. There could be a former connection, whether that be with other members of the coaching staff, whether that be with players, whether that be with upper management, whether that be with ownership. When you have guys that have been in the league for literal decades, they build connections. A lot of these guys should be able to have good interpersonal relationship skills, and they just have an ability to go back on these, relationships and say, I've known you for 20 years, you've known me. And when you have that kind of relationship and that history and that understanding of each other, I'd imagine that it is much easier to hire somebody that might have recently got the boot, because you could say, I know this person, good guy, good work ethic, good mind, just in a bad situation in another city with another team with another entire roster situation, he's going to be better here. Whether or not that's actually true really doesn't matter. But having that, tie back to the past, whether that be nostalgia or reality, I don't know. Because again, you don't want to mix your feelings with business, but I think that sometimes that does happen in the league. I talk about how it's weird because in some ways it's very, very serious. You got your neck on the chopping block where you worry about job security, but sometimes I do think the old boys club or whatever does kind of hold true in some circumstances, because some of these guys have been able to stick around for a little bit longer than I thought. And then the final reason, I'm just going to go out there and say it, it's just easier because you can just fall back on so many things. And you oftentimes see a lot of these younger head coaches, I think, join these teams that aren't very good. And then you say, well, they were terrible. But when you see some of these guys like Warsawski and whatnot with these younger sides like San Jose, do you honestly expect success right away? The answer is probably not. But when you look at the results, especially for these younger guys, when they're put in bad situations, I think it's harder. I do think one of the good things is if you're able to get your foot into the door in the league, you can probably get a better opportunity, especially if you're on a bottom side team. I do think there's instances where if you're a coach and you're with the team, there could be some serious step downs. You look at David Quinn and how when he got shifted over to San Jose, they were nowhere near competing. You kind of knew that was just going to be bad results regardless. But at the end of all this, it's just so much easier in so many different ways when you can say from the top all the way to the down in management and just all the way down to fans. It's easier to explain these things. And when you have a PR team that can point to all these things, you've got photos of big moments. When you have got all these achievements that you can kind of point to, versus saying, oh, well, he was a coach in ECHL, AHL, whatever division level you want to say. It is something that is a little bit different because the NHL is the best league in the world, and we can talk about achievements in lower leagues, but when it's all said and done, we have the best teams. We have the best league. Again, like we've already talked about, the best players. I mean, you've got players coming over from Europe. You've got players, of course, in Canada and the US and whatnot that are just, they're worldly, I guess, in this sense. They are the cream of the crop, the top of the top, and that's why I think in this regard as well, you just imagine, head coaches, they're probably going to get recycled. And this isn't something that's just solely related to us, but it is something that's talked about quite a bit. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing unless somebody is really underqualified and you're wondering how in the world do they keep getting jobs. But at the same time, being a younger guy, I do know how it is when you're really just chomping at the bit to try to get your opportunity, and you're like, this 75-year-old man that has got 40-some years coaching that, he's got his day in the sun, is getting that job over you. It is something where it's kind of a tough pill to swallow, but again, comes with the territory. Got to work, they've worked, and they have been able to prove to some extent that they're hopefully qualified, and I imagine that's the case, but just something that I think at times can get a little bit rough because you're like, this guy's coaching his sixth team. But anyway, what are your thoughts on all that? NHL coaches getting recycled. Let me know down below in the comments. Also, please make sure to like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new. Everybody stay safe, Have a great night, and you good love hockey, alright. Goodbye, Brigadiers and Brigadettes. This is your captain signing off. Have a great night.